This is the final episode of the Building Materials Group Career Series. Up to now, you've heard more than one interesting story about what life is like in the Building Materials Group sandbox. Today's guests have a whole new perspective. I'm happy to be joined by landscape architect turned roofing consultant Lloyd Dubisky and by SME's own architect, Daredevil, and masonry expert Amanda Cassidy. Well, I'm here today with Amanda Cassidy and Lloyd Dubisky, who are my colleagues in the Building Materials Group. Amanda, why don't you introduce yourself, tell people about what you do?
My name is Amanda Cassidy, just like Eric said. I am a registered architect here at SME. I am also a team leader, an assistant group leader, a project manager, and solver of building problems.
And I'm Lloyd Dubisky, and I'm a senior project consultant here at SME. And my main focus is roof consulting. And I was also a registered landscape architect, but I have since let my registration lapse since I'm nearing within a year of my retirement. I didn't figure I needed to keep that going. And I am currently training the new group of roofing consultants coming up. And as Amanda said, also a project manager, client manager,
attic climber,
go out and get the work manager, wear a lot of hats
swing
here.
Stage dropper.
Yep.
So today we're talking about career paths and kind of how we all got to where we are. And I know that, you two kind of have sort of different ways of having gotten here. Amanda, what brought you down this road?
I was kind of like you, Eric. I knew at an early age I wanted to be an architect. I did have a lot of influences in my upbringing that I think got me to where I am today. One of them that sticks out really big in my mind was just the simple fact that I would look at my mom's country living magazines, and inside that magazine there were always like set of 2 pages that had floor plans inside them. And so I would just study those floor plans and try to rearrange them and try to figure out like, how can I make this better? So that was one of the, top things that I can reach back in and say this directly relates. Another thing I think in the back of my mind, I grew up with my parents renovating a 110-year-old farmhouse with us kids in it. So we just fix things. The way the kitchen looked when we had to live in that house, the air flowing through, no carpet. It was a disaster, really, but it helped me kind of build where I am today. I think that's a huge influence too. But that was more in the background for me.
What about you, Lloyd?
Well, I think I had a fairly similar upbringing to Amanda. I was born, in Belleville, Michigan, in a rural area, dirt road. We ran around out in the fields and we made our own forts and tree houses. And I just love creating things. I always, we'd dig a hole and put a piece of plywood over it, cover it with dirt, and dig a tunnel into it and make our own forts. And I just like creating things. Kind of led me down this path where I'm at now.
In your case, Lloyd, your education wasn't exactly headed in the direction you're in now.
One of the paths I took, like every college student, I started out wanted to be a wildlife biologist, but quickly decided that I wanted to become a landscape architect. And I used to do things that led me to that as a kid as well. Like we dam up creeks and make our own little landforms and things. I always liked the natural world, but also liked creating things, and landscape architecture led itself, right into melded those two things together. Started out as a landscape architect, but I worked as a apprentice roofer starting in 82 and put myself through college and quickly learned that, getting yelled at by people with half the education that I had, I needed to move into something else. And went back to college, that's when I went back into landscape architecture and kept roofing all the way through.
Amanda, I know that you had a chance to work at the Dow Gardens, which architecturally is rather significant. Can you tell us about that?
Part of the reason I did some of the internships when I was younger is because of my mother and her pushing, pushing, pushing. She had dreams for us as our own dreams too, and she was really a big pusher in how do you get to that goal. And so how you get to those goals, the end goal was to be an architect. The end goal was going to Lawrence Tech, but how do we get there? So every job that I had once I started college started to try to tie those things together. So I'm like, okay, if I work at Dow Gardens the first year, I can see Dow Howell Gilmore across the way. I can see the, Eldon B. Dow building. And I really wanted to be in that home and studio because that's just, a great influence on architecture. So for me, it was one step at a time, right? So I worked at the gardens first. So then the architecture firm would look at me because I was just right across the way. And so then I got my internship at Dow Howell Gilmore, and then I was an archival intern. So I got to work directly with Eldon B. Dow's drawings, which was awesome. Just being in that building every day was an amazing experience for me. So that was all because of my mother just pushing me forward, saying, you will have this job. You're going to apply for these things, and trying to get me like one step closer.
See, I told my mother I was going to be an architect when I was 7, and I'm not entirely sure she believed me. But just the differences in our family, I suppose.
Yep.
After 8 other kids, I think she was a little worn out with, dreams and aspirations.
Well, I was the firstborn, so, extra pushing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Extra. Yeah. Right. Right. They wanted you out of the house. So, like I say, that, our career working as consultants in, building enclosures, roofs for you, Lloyd, and really more masonry walls and more general forensic work for you, Amanda. It's kind of different from the people who, like normal architect who pursues a career. And I know in your case, Lloyd, that you started out on the, you kind of morphed your landscape architecture career into a career as a roofing consultant. From an education, standpoint or work in other firms, can you tell me a little bit about how that sort of shaped your direction in going this way?
Yeah, with me being in landscape architecture, I just love to draw and create my own details and graphics. And kind of what led me to roof consulting was that I think the biggest thing was my terrible timing for when I got out of undergrad and graduate school. I popped out in a recession every time, so it was hard to find gainful employment in landscape architecture whenever I got out, and I forced me back into the roofing because I was an independent student. I went back to college a little older, in my mid-20s, so I didn't have the folks to move back with, so I kept roofing, and then I eventually got into
you can be honest, they changed the locks, didn't they?
They did, and they moved twice. Didn't tell me. So, I did work in landscape architecture eventually, but then again, another recession came along, and it kind of pushed me back towards a roofing manufacturing company that I worked for, and I was able to use my training and my I learned how to use CAD, and I knew how to work with PDF markups, and it worked really well with roof consulting because I was doing something that the other consultants weren't doing, creating, drawings and plans and reports that just looked sharper than the other competitors did. So that training in landscape architecture gave me a heads up over the other consultants in the area.
So something back to what Lloyd was saying, where he was saying in school, he used the training that he was receiving and the things he was being taught at school that he started to like. I took some of those same things and decided I did not like them. I was not a huge fan of being on the computer and drawing in CAD and doing my design that way. I was more hands-on. I'm still like that today. You can show me something, and Eric, of course, knows this, and so does Lloyd. You can show it to me on a sheet of paper all day long, and I'm saying, can you just show it to me in the field? Because that's the way my mind works. And so that's part of the reason why I'm here at SME, is I wanted an alternative career path to just straight architecture. I knew right away what my friends were doing while I was in college, and I did not want to sit on the computer and draw CAD details all day long. I needed to see it to understand it. I learned it also in building systems. We had our building systems class, and we were drawing things, but I didn't really understand what I was drawing until I got to see it in the field. And so that to me was kind of my turning point. I really didn't know exactly what SME was going to have me do, but I knew I was going to be in the field on construction sites, and that was the key to me jumping in here.
Sure. So then how did you end up here at SME?
I actually knew Keith Toro, who is part of our infrastructure group. He was in a fraternity at Lawrence Tech, and I was in a sorority, so we knew each other there. And so he actually brought me here. He said, I don't know what you're going to be doing here, but let's try. I said, okay. And I didn't really have other resumes out, so that really made my mom not so happy, because I was kind of putting my eggs all in one basket being here. And I'm like, no, Mom, I'm going to get this job. I'm going to get this job. It's going to be okay. As she's worrying about me coming back home, right, Lloyd?
Yeah. Oh, no, my plan.
Yeah, she's coming back. Yeah, my parents didn't move twice. I'm not as bad as Lloyd.
And when did you start here?
I started here in 1999 as an intern for the summer, which I just stayed on board, got offered a full-time position in the year 2000. So,
Lloyd, your situation is completely different.
Yeah, I was down in Indianapolis at the time. I grew up here in southeastern Michigan, but I had been down in Indianapolis for close to 15 years. I moved down there to work with a large roofing manufacturing company as a technical rep for them, and then branched out with one of my cronies out of that company. We started our own roof consulting company, and that didn't work out between us. And then I started my own company, roof consulting and property management, and also did some general contracting. So I had done that for about 9 years, and the phone rang one day on New Year's Day. Kind of surprised me. I thought it was just a solicitor calling, and it was a recruiter asking me if I was interested in taking a roof consulting job in either Dallas or Detroit. And I thought, well, Detroit's home. About time I went back home. So that's how I initially met with the people here at SME, and I had heard good things about SME, so was willing to, entertain it, and it worked out great for me.
They didn't tell him I was here.
I learned that the
Later.
hard way.
So I know that, both of you you've had experiences in other places, Amanda, maybe you a little less so, but I think for myself, SME is very different for me. Like I say, I just said this morning that, I started here when I was 52, and after being here now 8+ years, I really feel like I probably would have been better off starting here when I was 32. What do you think makes SME different from other places and other options?
For me, I'm not sure if I'm really the best to answer that, because I grew up in SME. This really is all I know, besides people telling me things from outside companies. The things that I think make it a great place is just feeling like it's a family company. I like feeling the security. I feel like we are very well planned out. And so we can make it through all the ups and downs that happen, recessions and things like that, where I've rode through some hard times here at SME and I've still here. I also have my husband here. So we're, yes, back in that eggs all in one basket, but we both feel that it's a place we want to stay because we do feel like we have really grown up here and friends here too.
What about you, Lloyd?
The thing I really find different and refreshing about SME is that I feel very autonomous here, that I could do whatever I want, whatever I'm interested in. If I find an interest, like my passion is old historic buildings and roofs, slate, tile, copper, those type of things. And I've kind of tried to make a niche into those areas and tried to cultivate clients who have those, type of old roofs that I love working with. I find that, in addition and kind of supporting that autonomous feeling I have, there's a lot of support here with the people around me who, if I don't know something, I can walk right down the hall and talk to Charlie or Hyder or Nick or Shane or Amanda or you and say, here's what I see. Here's a picture. What do you think? When I was on my own, there's a little bit of an uneasy feeling when you ran into something you were unfamiliar with. And, what do you do? Well, here, there's answers in, around every corner and in every office, somebody's got the right answer, and it doesn't take you long to find it.
Lloyd talked about a couple of things that I wanted to kind of expand on. He talked about he feels like he can go in whatever direction he wants to go. If he has a passion towards something, that SME will support him. And that's 100% true. We've seen multiple people within SME get a spark about something new that they've never done. And they're allowed to just run with it and create their own little mini business within SME. And I think that is another important thing to talk about.
I'm planning a toaster museum in the Driller High Bay.
Yes, good luck with that one. If it's going to get messy. The other thing I thought about too when Lloyd was talking is just being hands-on with your projects. So you are the person who go out to the site to write the proposal. You're the person who will go out into the field and check things over. You do the design. So you're taking your projects from one stage all the way to the end. And Lloyd and I both can attest that the two of us, even being some of the elders within the company now, still end up, crawling around attics and groaning and moaning while we're on a swing stage or wherever we're at. And that's part of the thing that I still like. It's alive, that you're really part of that project. You're making that project.
Yeah, it really keeps it fresh because you're not just sitting in an office. You're not totally standing out on a job site when it's cold or rainy. You can make decisions on where you are that day based on how nice it is. I know Amanda and I have said, well, it's beautiful out there. Why don't we, head down to the seminary, see what's going on down there.
Yep.
No, again, I talk about starting here at 52. If at 32, you would have told me that, in 20 years, you're going to have a harness and you're going to have your lift card and you're going to be, out there in crawl spaces and out there, hanging off of buildings. I would have said, well, I think you're crazy. But I think, also for me, as I am blessed with a short attention span, I find the work here is almost perfect for me because there are very few multi-month, much less multi-year projects here. Normally our projects are pretty quick, and that's good for me. There's always something new to learn. But that gets me to the real question about consulting. We're consultants. We really aren't the the design professionals of record in most of the things that we do. We're either helping someone out who's in the process of building something, or we're trying to fix something that's gone wrong, either a week after the building opened or 10 years after the building opened. Is there something about consulting that makes it different from traditional practice?
Yeah, for me, having worked as a technical person for a roofing manufacturing company, you were more representing the company and looking out for the bottom line of the company. And what we do now is problem solve for our clients. And to me, that's much more rewarding to go in and somebody says, Lloyd, I've got this big problem. No one else has been able to solve it. Can you come in and help us out? And going in and figuring out what it is that other people didn't see and being able to figure it out and solve their problem is very rewarding.
I think it's getting back to the details. We're a very technical group. So like what Lloyd's saying, we see what other people don't see and look in the spots other people aren't looking. And sometimes I think having that all the experts around you also helping with that end of it, just like Lloyd was saying earlier, you have a team of people that all know a lot about all these building systems and how things go together. So if you don't know it, one of your colleagues will know it.
Something that I have often thought about why I'm glad that I came here is because before I was just involved in roofing. I've come here and learned about curtain wall systems, masonry, so many other parts of the building that I didn't have to really pay much attention to. Now I feel I know so much more. That's going to help me when I get my retirement home and can make it super energy efficient. And
are you buying an old church?
I can help you with that.
As a matter of fact, I have one. I can show you.
Oh yeah, there is one up north.
Yeah. During your time here, what about? Tell me about your favorite projects.
Well, mine, I've worked on really large ones that I'm very proud of. 6.5 acre standing seam metal roof on a casino up in mid-Michigan is kind of impressive and technical as that was. My favorite project was re-roofing the design and the re-roofing of an old Gothic church in downtown Detroit that was built in 1894, and just the beauty and the magnitude of that project, and knowing that new roof is going to last 50 to 75 years, and it just looks stunning on that old church in downtown Detroit that is just an icon, for the area in Greektown there. That's the jewel in my crown of roofing projects.
And Lloyd needs more jewels. Actually, he needs more holy water. Every time we go into one of these churches, I put a little extra on him. I think for me, it goes back to my churches too. Really, it's about working. My favorite projects are my historic restoration projects, and most of them are masonry, huge mass masonry buildings. I love it when I get to dabble a little bit into the historic roofing also, because there's slate and the copper and how all those things tie together. Mass masonry walls and understanding why things are leaking. We go back to our graphic standards from the 1930s to look at those details, to do some research to figure out, why'd they do a certain thing? Why am I seeing stress here? And then for me, I think my favorite part is not necessarily just a project, but working with the people I get to work with. I learned a lot from contractors and growing up with the restoration contractors, them yelling at me and me saying, I read this out of a book. But I learned a lot along the way from them and watching them restore these historical buildings. I give them a lot of credit that I think sometimes out in the world, we don't give the contractors what they're due because they are the craftspeople. And when you find those tradespeople that really care about what they're doing, it's amazing to watch what problem you're solving come to life with how they're putting it together.
I'm glad you brought that up because it reminded me of the day that I first went out to that church to do my initial assessment. I was climbing up through the steeple, and having worked for a local company that did slate, tile, and copper, we did a lot of work on the churches in downtown Detroit, but I hadn't worked in that one. But we would always go up in the spire, up in the steeple, we would always write or carve our initials inside of there. And there was always old, initials and signatures of people back into the early 1900s. And I thought, I wonder if my old boss, Tom, and his son, Tommy, had maybe written their signatures or their initials somewhere in there. And it was St. Patrick's Day, and both of them were full Irish. And I was there on St. Patrick's Day, and I was up in the steeple, and I found both of their names written down probably 15 years prior. And both of them had passed away just a few years ago. So it was a very, moving day for me. Here I am looking for their signatures, and I find the two Irish boys, on St. Patrick's Day. It was a neat experience. And Amanda, I'm glad she brought that up because, I was so indebted to both of them for teaching me a trade that's taken me into my 60s now.
So by now, the young folks who are listening to this podcast are all thinking, these guys have a really cool job. What kind of advice would you give them, if it's a college student, say, and we're beginning to turn their heads here a little bit, thinking about consulting as an option?
Get out there and work, your summer job. Get in the construction trades, something that you think you would like, and ask questions of the tradespeople, like Amanda said, that are out there, and watch what they do. I remember my first couple of years, I was just amazed, heading to the roof, going up past the masons who were putting the brick up the exterior, and watching how they did it, because I had no idea as a high school kid, and then in my early 20s, I didn't know how that, brick got on those walls, and watching the electricians pull wires, and, just watch and ask questions of people. They'll be happy to, give you answers.
I think on my end, I think it did play a part, even though when my mom was pushing me, I might have not always been the happiest. In the end, it's focusing on what your goals are and trying to get there just one step at a time, one summer at a time. But another thing that I was told by one of the mentors I hear at SME, and it goes back to kind of what Lloyd was saying too, but take whatever experience you have, whatever the position is that you're taking for the meantime, and just soaking in whatever information you can soak in there. I might have been, as an intern here, put out on many jobs that I didn't particularly think mattered to what I wanted to do. But when you're on that site, look around you, pay attention to how other things are going together. I might have been there to look at roofing one day or masonry, but I'm also watching the steel get constructed, the concrete get poured, the waterproofing get put on. So there are lots of things to soak up other than just the thing that you're there for. So take those experiences and try to extract those smaller bits that can stay in the back of your mind, and later on put back to use if you decide to do something other than, to do something like consulting. Because I think in the consulting world, you get to take the technical pieces, the really minute technical details, and bring them to life and make them work well.
Yeah, and I think something that I hadn't thought of is that there's so many more resources now. Like if you see something like Amanda was saying that interests you, watch a YouTube video on it. There's everything, I do a lot of my research when I come across something that I haven't really had that much experience with. A YouTube video, somebody has put out a YouTube video on that very thing, most likely. And so that's a pretty good resource for somebody to follow up on as well.
Okay. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. It was a lot of fun.
You're always a lot of fun, Eric.
I concur.
See you later, dudes.
And with that, you've just listened to the last episode of the Build and Revitalize podcast series featuring SMEs Building Materials Group. Thanks to all our guests for sharing their insights and perspective, and a special thanks to today's guests, Lloyd Dubisky and Amanda Cassidy. If you have questions about SMEs Building Materials Group or would like to learn more about the opportunities a career in the field offers, please visit our website at www.sme-usa.com/expertise/building-materials. Be sure to subscribe to the Build and Revitalize podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And don't forget to visit www.sme-usa.com/podcast to join the conversation, access the show notes, and catch up on our previous episodes. While you're at it, connect with SME USA on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube.